Danny Cole stepped off the transport ship and felt 100 eyes turn toward him. The docking bay of Station Verith 9 was massive, filled with species from across the galaxy. Most of them had never seen a human in person before. He was shorter than almost everyone around him. The Catherine stood nearly 7 feet tall with pale blue skin and sharp features. The Vorm were even bigger, built like walking mountains with thick gray hide. Even the smaller species, the Talani and the Dreth, looked at Danny like he was something strange and fragile. He kept his head up and walked forward. He had earned his place here. Earth had joined the Galactic Coalition 2 years ago, and Danny was one of the first humans accepted into the Defense Academy. It was supposed to be an honor. Right now, it felt like walking into a room where nobody wanted him. A Kathrani, female in a commander's uniform, stood at the center of the bay. She was tall and elegant, with cold silver eyes that seemed to cut through everything they looked at. Her name was Vera Solis, and she was one of the senior instructors at the academy. She watched Danny approach with an expression that was not quite disgust but very close to it. "So this is what Earth sends us," she said. Her voice carried across the bay. She was not trying to be quiet. "I was told humans were unimpressive. I see the reports were accurate." Danny stopped in front of her. He said nothing. There was nothing to say that would change her mind, and he knew it. Vera circled him slowly, examining him like a farmer examining weak livestock. Small, slow, no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses. She stopped in front of him again. "Tell me, human, what exactly do you think you can offer the academy?" "I can learn," Danny said. His voice was calm. "That is why I am here." Vera's silver eyes narrowed. "Learning requires potential. I see none in you." She turned and walked away, leaving Danny standing alone in the bay. The other cadets watched him with a mix of curiosity and pity. None of them spoke to him. Danny picked up his bag and followed. The signs to the cadet quarters. His roommate was already there when he arrived. Thomas Reyes was another human, a few years older than Danny, with dark hair and a quick smile. He was one of only 3 humans at the academy. "You met Vera," Thomas said. It was not a question. "She seems friendly," Danny said. Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She hates humans. Has since first contact. There was an incident, a misunderstanding. Her brother died. She has blamed us ever since." Danny sat on his bunk and looked at the bare metal walls. "Does she treat you the same way?" "She treats all humans the same way, but she seems to have chosen you for special attention." Thomas shook his head. "Keep your head down. Survive the training. Do not give her reasons to fail you." Danny nodded, but he was not sure he could follow that advice. The first combat assessment came 3 days later. The cadets gathered in a large training hall with padded floors and observation platforms above. Instructor Gorath, a massive Vorm with scars across his face, explained the rules. Each cadet would face an opponent chosen by the instructors. The goal was to demonstrate skill, adaptability, and determination. When Danny's turn came, Vera stepped forward with a thin smile on her face. "The human will face Cadet North," she announced. A murmur went through the crowd. North was a Kathrani, one of the largest in the cadet class. He stood nearly 7.5 feet tall, with arms that could crush stone. Pairing him against Danny was not a test. It was a punishment. Danny stepped onto the mat anyway. North looked down at him with something like pity. "I will try not to hurt you too badly, human." "Thank you," Danny said. "I cannot promise the same." The fight began. Danny knew he could not win. North was faster, stronger, and had years of combat training. But Danny had something else. He had grown up on Earth, a world where everything was trying to kill you. He had learned to take punishment and keep moving. North hit him hard. Danny went down, rolled, and got back up. North hit him again. Danny went down again, and got back up again. This continued for several minutes. Danny never landed a significant blow, but he also never stopped trying. Blood ran from his nose and a cut above his eye. His ribs screamed with pain. Still, he rose. The crowd grew quiet. They had expected the human to fall and stay down. They had not expected this. Finally, North grabbed Danny and threw him to the mat with enough force to crack the padding. Danny lay there, unable to move, his body refusing to respond to his commands. "Yield," North said. There was respect in his voice now. Danny tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. He shook his head. No. Instructor Gorath stepped forward and ended the match. Danny had lost, but he had not yielded. Veyra walked onto the mat and looked down at Danny with contempt. This is what humans call courage. The stubbornness of a creature too stupid to know when it is beaten. Danny managed to push himself onto his elbows. His vision was blurred and his whole body was shaking. But he looked up at Vera and spoke clearly. "On Earth, we call it not giving up." Vera's eyes flashed with anger. The desperation of a species that does not know when to die. That is all you are, human. Prey that has not yet accepted its place. She walked away, leaving Danny bleeding on the mat. Tomas helped him to the medical bay later. The doctors patched him up with technology that seemed like magic, healing his wounds in hours instead of weeks. "You should have yielded," Tomas said quietly. "You made her look foolish in front of the other instructors. She will not forget that." "I could not yield," Danny said. "If I yield once, I will yield again. And then I am exactly what she says I am." That night, Danny returned to the training hall alone. His body still ached, but he began practicing anyway. He practiced until his muscles burned and his lungs screamed for air. Then he practiced more. He did not know that Instructor Gorath was watching from the shadows. The old Vorn said nothing, but there was something new in his eyes when he looked at the human. Something like interest. The next morning, an alert went out across the station. Long-range sensors had detected something at the edge of Coalition space. Something that made even the veterans go pale. Apex hunters. The nightmare of the galaxy. They were coming, and they were heading straight for Varath 9. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Danny's life. The Apex hunter threat remained at the edge of Coalition space, watching but not attacking. The Academy continued its training, but there was a tension in the air that everyone could feel. Commander Vera seemed determined to break Danny before the hunters ever arrived. Every assignment she gave him was designed to make him fail. The most dangerous routes during patrol exercises. The heaviest equipment during endurance training. The most experienced opponents during combat drills. She wanted him to quit, to prove that humans did not belong at the Academy. Danny refused to give her that satisfaction. One morning, she announced a survival exercise on Varath 9b, the jungle moon that orbited the station. The cadets would be dropped into hostile terrain and required to reach an extraction point within 48 hours. Failure meant automatic removal from the program. When Danny received his assignment, Tomas looked at the datapad and went pale. "This is impossible," Tomas whispered. "She has given you a route through the Thornback territory. Those creatures are Class 4 predators. And your equipment list." He scrolled through it. "Half of this gear is damaged or outdated. The navigation unit is a model that has not been used in 20 years. Danny looked at the assignment calmly. "Then I will have to be careful." "Danny, this is not a test. This is execution. She wants you to die down there, or at least to call for extraction so she can have you removed." "Then I will not call for extraction." Thomas grabbed his arm. "Listen to me. Pride is not worth your life. No one will think less of you for recognizing an impossible situation." Danny met his friend's eyes. I will think less of me. And I am the one who has to live with myself. He gathered his faulty equipment and boarded the dropship with the other cadets. The jungle moon was everything the reports had warned about. The air was thick and hot, filled with strange sounds and stranger smells. Plants with razor-sharp leaves grew everywhere. Insects the size of small dogs buzzed through the undergrowth. And somewhere in the distance, the thornbacks were hunting. Danny moved carefully through the terrain. His navigation unit failed within the first hour, just as Tomas had predicted. He was forced to navigate by the position of the sun and the stars, skills he had learned as a child on Earth. The other cadets had functioning equipment and safer routes. They would reach the extraction point in less than a day. Danny had 48 hours to cover twice the distance through the most dangerous part of the moon. He did not stop moving. When night fell, he did not sleep. The thornbacks hunted in the darkness, their 6 legs carrying them silently through the trees. Danny heard them circling his position several times, but he kept moving, never staying in one place long enough for them to strike. On the second day, his water purifier broke. He was forced to find water sources the old-fashioned way, testing small amounts and waiting to see if they made him sick. He lost 4 hours to vomiting when one source proved toxic. Still, he kept moving. The other cadets had already reached the extraction point. They waited there, watching the countdown timer that showed how much time remained for the stragglers. Most of them expected Danny to have called for help by now. Some of them expected him to be dead, with 6 hours remaining. Danny stumbled out of the jungle and collapsed at the edge of the extraction zone. He was covered in mud, blood and the strange purple sap of the jungle plants. His uniform was torn in a dozen places. He had lost one boot somewhere in the swamp, and his foot was swollen and bleeding. But he was alive, and he had completed the exercise. The other cadets stared at him in silence. Commander Vera pushed through the crowd, her silver eyes burning with anger. She had been certain he would fail. She had designed the test specifically to ensure his failure. And yet here he stood. "You are late," she said coldly. "The other cadets finished yesterday." Danny straightened up, despite the pain screaming through his body. The assignment was to reach the extraction point within 48 hours. "I have reached the extraction point within 48 hours. With faulty equipment and an impossible route." Vera stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "You should have failed. You should have called for extraction. Why do you keep fighting when you are so clearly inferior?" Danny looked at her without flinching. "Because where I come from, giving up means someone else has to carry your weight. I will not do that." A murmur went through the watching cadets. Some of them were looking at Danny differently now. Not with pity, but with something closer to respect. Vera saw it too, and her anger deepened. "You think you have proven something, human? You have proven nothing, except that your species is too stupid to recognize defeat." She turned and walked away, leaving Danny swaying on his feet. Thomas appeared at his side and helped him toward the medical transport. "You are either the bravest person I have ever met or the most insane. Can I be both?" Danny asked weakly. That night, after the doctors had healed his wounds again, Thomas sat with Danny in their quarters and told him the truth about Commander Vera. "It happened 8 years ago," Thomas said quietly. "During first contact between Earth and the Kethrani, there was a miscommunication, a situation that escalated too quickly. Weapons were fired. Her brother was part of the Kethrani delegation. He died trying to protect civilians from what he thought was a human attack." Danny was silent for a long moment. "It was a misunderstanding?" "Completely. Both sides were cleared of wrongdoing. But Vera never accepted that. She needed someone to blame, and she chose humanity." Tomas shook his head. "She cannot see past her grief. To her, every human is responsible for her brother's death." Danny thought about this. He thought about the hatred in Vera's eyes, the desperate need to prove that humans were worthless. It did not excuse her behavior, but it explained it. "She is not going to stop," Danny said. "No, she is not." Before Danny could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. A voice came over the communication system, calm but urgent. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Apex hunter vessels have entered the system. Repeat, this is not a drill." Danny and Tomas looked at each other. The Apex hunters had stopped watching. They were attacking, and everyone on Station Vareth 9 was now prey. The station shook as something slammed into the outer hull. Then another impact. Then another. Danny grabbed the wall to steady himself as the floor tilted beneath his feet. "Breaching pods," Tomas said, his face pale. "They are already inside the station." Screams echoed through the corridors. Gunfire. And beneath it all, a sound that made Danny's blood run cold. A clicking, chittering noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Apex hunters had arrived. Danny had seen pictures of them in the Academy's database. They were nightmares given form. 8 feet tall with armored exoskeletons that could stop most weapons. Multiple limbs ending in claws that could tear through metal. And eyes, dozens of small black eyes that tracked movement with terrifying precision. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They hunted. They killed. They collected trophies from the species they destroyed. No one had ever driven them back once they chose their hunting ground. "We need to reach the main defense point," Tomas said. Already moving toward the door, they ran through the corridors, joining other cadets who were fleeing toward the central hub. But the station was a maze of passages and sections, and the hunters were everywhere. A group of cadets turned a corner ahead of Danny and immediately started screaming. He saw a flash of dark chitin, a spray of blood, and then silence. "This way," Danny shouted, pulling Tomas down a side passage. They found themselves in a group of about 15 cadets, a mix of species, all running from the same horror. Among them were several Kethrani, including Cadet North, the one who had fought Danny in the training hall. And leading them, limping from a wound in her leg, was Commander Vera. Her silver eyes met Danny's. For a moment, her usual contempt flickered. Then it returned, weaker than before. "The main corridors are compromised," she said, her voice tight with pain. "We need to find another route." Before anyone could respond, the bulkheads ahead of them slammed shut. Emergency protocols designed to contain hull breaches. They were sealed in. Danny checked the station map on his datapad. "We are in the agricultural section. There is no other exit." "Then we are trapped," one of the Kethrani cadets said, panic rising in his voice. The clicking sound grew louder. The hunters were coming. Vera tried to stand straighter, but her injured leg buckled. Tomas caught her before she fell. She looked around at the terrified cadets, and Danny saw something he had never expected to see in her eyes: uncertainty. Fear. She did not know what to do. Danny looked around the agricultural section. It was a large dome filled with plants from a dozen worlds, irrigation systems running along the ceiling, storage units filled with fertilizers and chemicals. His mind began working, sorting through possibilities. "We can fight them," he said. Everyone turned to look at him. "Are you insane?" the panicked Kethrani cadet demanded. "The Apex hunters have destroyed entire fleets. We are cadets with basic weapons. We are not trying to destroy them," Danny said calmly. "We are trying to survive. And to survive, we need to make them choose easier prey." Vera stared at him. "Explain." Danny walked to the center of the group, his mind racing. "The Apex hunters are predators. The most successful predators in the galaxy. But every predator follows certain rules. They seek easy kills. They avoid situations where the cost of the hunt is greater than the reward. They target the weak and avoid the strong. We are weak, North said bitterly. They think we are weak, Danny corrected. That is different. Right now, they are sweeping through the station, killing everyone they find because no one is fighting back. But if we hurt them, if we make them bleed, they will reconsider. A predator that takes too much damage hunting one prey will starve before it can hunt again. Tomas was nodding slowly. You want to make us too expensive to kill. I want to make them afraid of us. Danny pointed at the irrigation systems. Those pipes carry water under high pressure. We can weaponize them. The fertilizer storage contains chemicals that are explosive when mixed correctly. The plant specimens include several species with toxic thorns and sap. He looked around at the group. We cannot win a straight fight, but we do not need to win. We just need to make them decide we are not worth the trouble. Vera's eyes narrowed. You think you can frighten apex hunters? They have never retreated from a hunt. Everything retreats eventually, Danny said. Every predator on Earth learned to avoid humans. Not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we were too stubborn to die quietly and too clever to die easily. We made ourselves expensive prey. He met her gaze directly. Let me show them what humans learned to do a long time ago. The silence stretched for a long moment. The clicking sounds grew closer. Finally, Vera nodded. What do you need us to do? Danny began giving orders. The cadets worked quickly, fear giving them energy. They rigged the irrigation pipes to spray at lethal pressure. They mixed chemicals into improvised explosives. They created barriers using storage containers and farming equipment. North and the other. Kethrani used their strength to build a defensive position in the center of the dome. Thomas helped rig the traps, his engineering knowledge proving invaluable. Even Vera contributed, using her tactical experience to identify the best choke points. Danny moved through them all, checking everything, adjusting positions, calming fears. He had never commanded anyone before, but something in his voice made people listen. They are going to come through that main entrance, he said, pointing to the sealed bulkhead. When they do, we hit them with everything. We do not stop until they decide we are too dangerous to hunt. A cadet from a species Danny did not recognize raised her hand, her voice trembling. What if they do not decide that? What if they just kill us all? Danny looked at her steadily. Then we make them pay for every single one of us. We make them remember that this group of cadets was the hardest prey they ever faced. And maybe that memory will save the next group they encounter. The bulkhead groaned. Something on the other side was trying to force it open. Everyone to positions, Danny said quietly. The cadets moved to their places. Weapons ready. Traps armed. Hearts pounding. The clicking grew deafening. And then the bulkhead exploded inward, and the apex hunters came through. The first hunter through the door was enormous, even by their standards. Its black eyes swept across the dome, taking in the group of cadets huddled behind their improvised barricades. Its mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Easy prey. Then he raised his hand and brought it down. The irrigation pipes exploded. Jets of water under crushing pressure slammed into the hunter, driving it backward. At the same moment, North triggered the first set of chemical explosives. The blast caught two more hunters as they entered, sending them tumbling. The dome erupted into chaos. More hunters poured through the breach, but now they were met with resistance. Cadets fired from behind cover while others activated traps. Chemical sprays burned through exoskeletons. Improvised barriers collapsed onto attackers. The toxic plant specimens Danny had positioned were triggered, releasing clouds of paralyzing spores. The hunters had expected terrified prey. They found a war. Danny moved through the battle, directing defenses, calling out targets. He saw a hunter break through the left flank and shouted for North. The big Kethrani turned and charged, slamming into the creature with all his weight. They went down together, struggling on the ground, until two other cadets arrived to help finish it. Another hunter leaped over the barricades entirely, landing in the middle of the defensive position. Cadets scattered in panic. Danny grabbed a container of fertilizer chemicals and threw it at the creature's face. When it hit, the mixture reacted with the hunter's natural secretions and burst into flames. The hunter screamed, a horrible high-pitched sound that hurt to hear. It retreated, burning. "Keep firing," Danny shouted. "Do not let them regroup." But the hunters were adapting. They had taken losses, something that clearly surprised them, but they were too many and too powerful. For every one that fell, two more took its place. The cadets' ammunition was running low. The traps were mostly spent. A hunter crashed through the barrier near Vera's position. She tried to raise her weapon, but her injured leg gave out and she fell. The creature loomed over her, its claws raised for the killing blow. Danny did not think. He simply moved. He crossed the distance in seconds, grabbing a metal maintenance tool from a fallen supply rack. He swung it with everything he had, connecting with the hunter's arm and knocking its strike off course. The claws tore through his shoulder instead of Vera's chest. Pain exploded through Danny's body, but he did not stop. He swung again, hitting the hunter's eyes. Then again, driving it back. Then again, the hunter retreated, clicking in what sounded like confusion. This tiny creature should have been dead. It should have fled. Instead, it was attacking. Tomas appeared beside Danny, firing at the hunter until it withdrew. Other cadets helped Vera to safety while Danny stood there, bleeding badly, his weapon still raised. "Danny, you need to get to cover," Tomas said urgently. "Not yet." Danny looked around the dome. The battle had reached a tipping point. Several cadets were down, dead or wounded. The survivors were exhausted and nearly out of weapons. The hunters had taken serious losses, but they were regrouping for a final push. If they attacked now, it would be over. Danny made a decision. He walked forward, past the barricades into the open space between the cadets and the hunters. Blood ran down his arm and dripped onto the floor. His body screamed at him to run, to hide, to survive. He ignored it. The hunters watched him approach. Their clicking grew uncertain. This was not the behavior of prey. Prey ran. Prey hid. Prey begged for mercy. This human did none of those things. Danny stopped about 20 feet from the lead hunter, a massive creature with scars across its exoskeleton that mocked it as an experienced killer. It was easily 3 times his size. Its claws could tear him apart in seconds. He raised his bloody maintenance tool and pointed it at the creature. "Come on then," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "I have more for you." The hunter tilted its head. Its many eyes studied Danny with something that might have been curiosity. Behind it, the other hunters grew still. They communicated in their clicking language. Danny could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Confusion. Uncertainty. This prey was wrong. This prey was damaged and alone, and should have been easy to kill. But it stood there without fear, without submission, challenging them. On Earth, humans had faced predators for millions of years. Lions and wolves and bears. Creatures stronger and faster and deadlier than any human. And over time, those predators had learned something important. Humans were not worth the trouble. Not because humans always won. They did not. But because humans never gave up. They fought back even when they were losing. They remembered and returned with greater numbers. They learned and adapted and became more dangerous with each encounter. Every predator on Earth had eventually decided that hunting humans cost more than it was worth. Danny was showing the apex hunters the same lesson. Lead hunter took a step forward. Danny did not flinch, did not back away. His eyes stayed locked on the creature, his weapon still raised, his stance still aggressive. Another step. Danny shifted his weight slightly, ready to fight. Ready to die fighting if necessary. The hunter stopped. For a long, terrible moment, nothing moved. Then the hunter made a sound. A low clicking that spread to the others. It turned away from Danny and began moving toward the breach in the bulkhead. The other hunters followed. They were leaving. The apex hunters, the nightmare of the galaxy, were retreating. Danny stood there, watching them go, until the last one had disappeared through the breach. Only then did his legs give out. He collapsed onto the floor, his vision going dark around the edges. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was Vera's voice, filled with disbelief. They retreated. They have never retreated. And then Tomas was there, pressing something against Danny's wounds, shouting for help. And then there was nothing but darkness. Danny woke to the soft hum of medical equipment and the smell of antiseptic. White light filled his vision, slowly resolving into the ceiling of the station's medical bay. He was alive. His shoulder was wrapped in regeneration bandages, and his entire body felt like one giant bruise. But he was alive. 3 days, said a familiar voice. Danny turned his head to see Thomas sitting beside his bed, looking exhausted but relieved. You have been unconscious for 3 days. The doctors were not sure you were going to make it. The others? Danny asked. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. 7 cadets died in the agricultural dome. Another 12 across the station. Tomas's expression was somber. But it could have been much worse. The reinforcements arrived about 6 hours after your little standoff. The hunters withdrew from the system completely. Danny closed his eyes. 7 dead. Faces he had trained with, fought beside. People who had trusted him to keep them alive. The commanders are calling it a victory, Tomas continued. The first time anyone has ever driven off an apex hunter assault before they completed their hunt. And word has spread about what happened in the dome. Word? Tomas smiled slightly. The human who made the hunters retreat. You are famous now, Danny. Or infamous, depending on who you ask. Over the next few days, Danny slowly recovered. The advanced medical technology of the Coalition healed his wounds faster than anything on Earth could have managed. But the doctors insisted he rest, and for once, Danny did not argue. Visitors came. Cadets who had survived the battle, wanting to thank him. Instructors who had heard the story and wanted to meet the human who had faced down apex hunters. Even Instructor Gorath stopped by, the massive one saying nothing but leaving a small medal on Danny's bedside table. The medal was old and worn, bearing symbols Danny did not recognize. It belonged to his father, Tomas explained later. He gives it to warriors who earn his respect. I do not think he has given it to anyone in years. On the 5th day, Commander Vera came. Danny was sitting up in bed when she entered, her leg fully healed now. She moved with the same grace as always, but something in her posture was different. The sharp edges had softened somehow. She stood at the foot of his bed, looking at him with an expression he could not read. You saved my life, she said finally. You were in danger. I reacted. I have spent 2 years trying to prove that humans are worthless, that your species is weak, cowardly, inferior. She paused, and when the moment came, when death was standing over me, a human threw himself between us without hesitation. Danny said nothing. There was nothing that needed to be said. Vyra moved closer. I thought your species survived by being invisible, by being so far beneath the notice of predators that they did not bother hunting you. I thought your stubbornness was stupidity, your persistence was desperation. Your refusal to yield was just the thrashing of prey that did not know it was already dead. She stopped beside his bed. I was wrong. Commander, let me finish. Her silver eyes held his. I have hated humans for 8 years. I blamed your entire species for my brother's death. And in my hatred, I failed to see what was right in front of me. Humans do not survive despite being weak. You survive because you are something the galaxy has never seen before. What is that? Danny asked. Prey that became predators. Creatures who learned to fight back against everything that tried to kill them, and who never stopped fighting until nothing dared to hunt them anymore. She shook her head slowly. The apex hunters have destroyed civilizations. They have never retreated from a hunt in recorded history. And you made them retreat. One wounded human with a maintenance tool, standing alone, and they retreated. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small object. It was a blade beautifully crafted, with a handle wrapped in pale blue material that seemed to shimmer in the light. This is a Ketharin. It is given to warriors who have proven themselves beyond doubt. Vera held it out to Danny. Among my people, there is no greater honor. Danny looked at the blade. Then at Vera. I do not want you to honor me because you feel obligated. Because I saved your life. I am not honoring you because you saved my life, Vera said quietly. I am honoring you because you showed me what courage truly looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear decide your actions. I have trained warriors for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like what you did in that dome. She placed the blade in his hands. You have earned this, Danny Cole, not as a human. As a warrior. Danny accepted the blade. It was lighter than he expected, perfectly balanced. He looked up at Vera and saw something in her eyes that had not been there before. Respect. True and hard-won. Thank you, Commander. Vera nodded once. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It was a small thing, barely visible, but it transformed her face completely. When you are recovered, report to the advanced training section. I will be teaching you personally from now on. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. And Danny? Next time you decide to face down apex hunters alone, try to bring better weapons. She left before Danny could respond. 2 weeks later, a coalition-wide announcement was broadcast from the military headquarters on the Central Worlds. Danny watched it with Thomas and a group of other cadets in the common room. Following the events at Station Verith 9, the Coalition Military Council has conducted a comprehensive review of human capabilities and tactical doctrine. Based on the evidence gathered, including reports from survivors and recovered sensor data, the Council has reached the following conclusion. The announcer paused. Effective immediately. Humanity is reclassified from Threat Level 7 to Threat Level 2. Engagement with human forces is not recommended without overwhelming superiority. All commanders are advised to update their tactical assessments accordingly. The room erupted in cheers. Danny sat quietly, still holding the Ketharin that Vera had given him. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. From prey species to second highest threat level in the galaxy. Not bad for a stubborn kid who would not stay down. That evening, Danny stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the apex hunters were regrouping. They would return eventually. They always did, but next time, they would remember. They would remember the station where prey became predators. Where a human had stood alone and made them feel something they had never felt before. Fear. Behind him. Danny heard footsteps. Vera came to stand beside him, looking out at the same stars. What are you thinking about? She asked. Danny considered the question. Earth, my home. Every predator there learned the same lesson eventually. Lions, wolves, bears. They all learned that humans were too stubborn to die and too dangerous to hunt. It took thousands of years, but they learned. He looked at Vera. I am thinking that the apex hunters just had their first lesson. And humans have always been very patient teachers. Vera nodded slowly. The galaxy is going to have to learn what your world learned a long time ago. What is that? She smiled that small, rare smile. Never hunt humans. They always remember. And they always come back. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. As the galaxy slowly began to understand what humanity really was, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the apex hunters clicked their strange language and told stories of the human who would not yield. The human who had stood alone and made them retreat. They would not forget. Neither would the rest of the galaxy.